All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick welcome and thank you for joining today's session. As I mentioned, my name is Steve Voigt, and I'm one of the marketing managers here at Litera Microsystems. In case you didn't know, the series you're about to hear is actually part of a monthly series called Industry Insights. During these series, we highlight industry trends and issues that are facing the legal space. And this month's session specifically is going to be discussing how law firms are using technology to address the ever-changing needs of their client demands. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. The webinar is going to run about 30 minutes, and we'll bake in some time at the end for questions. If you have questions, comments, ideas, you can enter those into the questions window on your screen, and then we'll do our best at the end of the presentation to get to as many questions as we can. So with that, I'm going to introduce today's presenter, Matt James. Matt is the Director of Sales Engineering and Evangelism here at Litera Microsystems, and he has over a decade of experience advising law firms on technology best practices. So with that, I'll let Matt take it away.
Great, thank you, Steve. As Steve introduced, and as you probably saw, the goal today is really to discuss and share some stories around how we've seen firms use technology to respond to some of the client demands and how they're changing in more recent years than traditionally in the past. As we step through this, I do kind of want to speak to the fact that as Steve gave an introduction to me and really the team that I run, the goal is to, in a professional manner, right, with the knowledge that we know, somewhat challenge status quo, and we'll see that throughout the presentation. But in a world where status quo really governs the way that we think, it limits the ability to be creative, and often it does require that we stick our necks out and maybe have a difficult conversation, and we're very, very conscious of that. But we still do want to challenge a market that many would say is primed for disruption, and maybe change the way that we think. So hopefully in the presentation you'll get a little bit of that, and if there's any questions, by all means, do send them across, and we'd be happy to answer those. The big portion of what we consider the changing client demands is addressed in the annual publication that we have. Not only is that a free physical and digital publication, but if you're not familiar with it, it's really a sounding board to what we're hearing in the landscape of legal. It's not to specifically talk about one of our products, but it talks about challenges that come from the workforce or technology, things that firms have introduced, things that vendors have introduced. But one of the big ones, obviously, is the client demands and what we're seeing in the changes there. So if you're not familiar with this, or if you haven't read this, it is a great publication. We'd be more than happy to make sure that we can get a copy in your hands. I wanted to just make sure that we touch on really what the agenda and the learning goals were today. This is probably what you saw on our landing page. I want to point out the fact that when we talk about client demands, it's usually around cost consciousness for faster and higher quality work. We often find that firms are spending a significant amount of time on questionnaires or RFPs to understand what is the firm doing for the best interest of their clients. And what I wanted to talk about were some ways that technology could help automate the repeatable and low value work, which is a common topic that we have in discussions with our customer base and prospects. The streamlining of consumption of data, right? We're in a place where the amount of data is almost overwhelming. How can we consume it, and how can we use it in our day-to-day? I really want to focus on the concept of efficiencies, but in the sense of logistical, and we'll dig into that. How we can create time in the day for more fee earnings. So we often say that if we create more time by some efficient tasks, that we could maybe go home earlier in the day, and we know that there's really a reality around more billing. And then the last one is just something I think we should all be aware of. There were some changes to the ABA model rules for professional conduct, and we'll step through that quickly. I also do have a demonstration prepared, so I'll keep an eye on time and be able to show a little bit of that here at the end. So as we go forward, a little bit of definitions on what we're describing low value and high value work. We often consider the low value work to be a necessary evil. It's required for the composition of work product, but it's never the best use of anyone's time, right? Technology can automate a lot of these tasks, and it's often redundant or unrewarding, and not the best use of an individual's time. And I listed out some things in the drafting phase of the workflow that really are going to be important here, such as the reuse of work product, which we know is prevalent as ever. The logistical aspects of things across your desktop, right? So finding language, finding products, finding the use and the button that you're looking for. The visiting and marking of areas of the document. So as we talk about very complex legal matters that can be hundreds of pages, the actual physical element of going paragraph by paragraph or page by page. The structuring of content, which is, again, a necessary evil. It gives us accuracy to our content, but isn't what our clients are paying us for. And then the removal of data about data, which is just, again, a general term for some of the metadata, but again, it's information that tells a lot about where that document came from, who's worked on it, the length in which it's been worked on. So I found this little image here, which is really all about the low value work associated with putting together these complex legal matters. But our focus should always be around the high value work, right? And these are often related to the institutional knowledge, the practical guidance, the composition of the legal language, right? This is what really gives people pride in their day-to-day. And it's really around the intention or desired meaning of that legal content, often the firm's intellectual property, right? We talk about millions of documents that live in the document repository. It's the expertise the individual can provide, often the reason that a client is reaching out to the firm, understanding that there's a high level of expertise and often a good result behind that. And then some other areas around positioning and stance inside of the legal matter, judicial opinions, and things that help ensure that the outcome is the desirable outcome. So now that we have a little bit of definitions around what we're kind of speaking to as we do that, I wanted to point out, jumped ahead here a little bit, I apologize. I wanted to point out some of the benefits associated with those, and we'll speak to each of these over time. But engagement and retention in today's day and age is something that I can't have a meeting without discussing, right? It's how do we get high quality talent into our firm, what sets us apart from others, especially as we look at lateral hires. But it's more important, how do we keep them around, right? How do we keep them beyond the 2 or 3 year trend where someone is moving on to something that has a better work-life balance or is far more rewarding? Which allows me to jump down to that bottom box, which is that if we can automate some of the low-value work, regardless of the position you are in, it's often rewarding, which then in return gives you loyalty to the organization or the firm that you're a part of. We did a survey at ILTA in years past, and there's often this response that so much time in my day is spent on administrative tasks as opposed to what I hope to accomplish or what I set out to do when I took on my role or my responsibilities. Self-sufficiency is more important than ever. As we look at firms getting lean, not having the support staff, having the turnaround more quickly than ever, the work product, we need to be a little more self-sufficient. We'll talk about some of the ways that we've traditionally worked that just logistically aren't as efficient as they could be. It's always about profitability. We'll dig into that. And then the ability to have competitive pricing, right? The ways that we're interacting from a pricing perspective with our client base are changing, and we need to ensure that we can handle that and that we're not letting some of the traditional workflows prevent us from remaining competitive in our pricing model. I think a big challenge, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, is around the aspirations of the firm, but the practicality in how that works in a day-to-day. If you've seen any of the demonstrations that myself or my team has done, we often tie it to a theme of in the life of, right? So in the life of a lawyer, in the day-to-day of someone, and their task and their job responsibilities, how do they consume data? How do they actually interact with certain technologies? So I pointed out that most firms aspire to comb their data and their document repositories, right? This drives a lot of the excitement for the general sense of AI. But what we find is right now it's not consumable. We could go through millions of documents, but then what? How do we use that? How do we consume it? How do we identify what's most important? So I pointed out that there's really three challenges I see. One of those is the information overload, right? Millions of documents. Even if we get that down to hundreds of thousands of documents into a project, we're still looking at thousands of results that are returned to an individual. Digital distraction is real as ever. Everything I see on the web is about how to stop being connected to your iPhone or your mobile device. And that may not be the answer, but what we do got to understand is that people have a difficult time staying focused on their task from end to end. In the world that we're speaking to, constructing a work product, right, it is difficult to not have to leave your work product to go to your DMS or to go to the web browser or to open additional content or screen hop and copy and paste across. It's practically impossible, and if you sit with anyone in their workflow day to day, we never see someone 100% devoted and focused on that particular task. And then I think we should keep in mind that there's two frames of mind, right? One is, as we look over legal matter, it's reading it and understanding it. We need to take into consideration that these matters can go over months at time, and when you're looking for maybe little finite mistakes or inconsistencies, that doesn't necessarily align with the way that it would be that the mind works as you read the content to try to understand the meaning. And I brought up a great simple example, which is around why SEO is real in the world of our search engines. So I typed Google search results into Google search result bar, and it came back with that many results that you could see sitting there, right? So we're looking at what, 5.3 billion results. And on the single front page of Google results, I had 7 web pages, 3 videos, and 4 other suggestions for what I might be searching for. So the results were down to, let's call it 10 results and 14 with suggestions out of these 5.3 billion. And this is what I mean by the ability to consume the data. We need technology that will allow us to search through all of those results, all of those documents, but present it in a manner that I can consume it as a human being, as an individual. Now, I could, at the bottom, see go 10 pages, go more, but often we don't get past that first page if we even go to the second page, and we're definitely not going past that second page. So here's a great example of how search engines have found ways to make all of this data consumable to us, but we may not have that today, or we may not be aware of the fact that that's possible in the legal landscape. I also wanted to point out an example. I'm big on use cases, and hopefully you're familiar with this, and if you're not, I think it's a new way of looking at how we take a look at our tech stack, as I call it. So efficiency, while often counterintuitive to some of the traditional billing arrangements that we know of, it still offers value, especially in the low value work, and logistical efficiency across the board is going to be relevant. So the traditional mindset that I brought up is very linear, right? We need to get from point A to point B, and that's often how we think about things. But there's this use case and white paper and a variety of resources that you could look at where UPS changed their mindset. And they basically said it's not about from getting point A to point B, but it's the way that they've turned into only taking right turns, right? Meaning that it allows them to continue working without disruption when you're trying to take a left across traffic or waiting for your left turn arrow in order to make that turn. And as a result, you can see, if you want to jump through some of the stats here, just the amount of packages, 350,000 more packages every year, the ability to save on gasoline, the ability to decrease, get more lean, which is probably very familiar to us, the amount of trucks that they use. And what they've done is identified that they can be far more efficient if they don't look at it in a linear fashion, and they constantly allow the individual to get over the next hurdle and anticipate that next step. I think the same should apply for the user experience in legal, right? So traditional culture, as I said, may dictate the process that involves we hand the document off, someone jumps to a different task. That's why we have support individuals. Or if we think of what our technology offering is inside of the firm, we often say, okay, we have technology for this point, and all the point solutions down the tech stack are here inside of the organization, and we're covered and we have no gaps. But the reality is that we're not understanding how those technologies are used in the day-to-day of an individual in the actual workflow, right? So taking that mindset that it's not about from getting point A to point B, but to prevent disruption in the tasks that we're looking to accomplish, you can get a different viewpoint in there. So I'm going to jump out of this PowerPoint really quickly and just show something that we've recently introduced, what we call our tech assessment. And what this has allowed us to do with firms and customers and prospects is say, okay, let's list out all of the tools or the technologies that you invest in. Let's list out all the tasks we know individuals are trying to accomplish, but then let's look at what it takes to accomplish those tasks with those technologies. Does it require us to jump around to different screens? Does it require a variety of clicks that may be unnecessary? Is it disruptive? Is it intuitive? All of these things that we can go ahead and do, and what we can now see is within the context of how someone works, are the technologies we brought in helpful or not? We approach this not with the goal of selling our technology, but education on both ends. And I like to say that there's no bad result, right? Either we find opportunity for growth in technology investment, or we find out that we're really empowering our users to get their daily tasks done. And you'll see we do it in a three-step phase where we go through the discovery of what tasks and products are important. We measure it out by things such as screen hops and process duration and number of clicks. And then we can come down to recommendations where we can say, here's areas that you can get more investment out of your current technology. Here's areas that you have gaps. Here's things for future consideration. So if this is of interest, again, we do have this on our website. We can absolutely get this conversation going. But this is a way of looking at your technology in the day-to-day as opposed to line items and a tech stack, as I often say. A couple of those distinguishing points that I like to talk about where technology may be better suited than people are going to be around the sense that firms are going lean, around anticipation of the next step, right? Knowing what needs to happen again, all about user disruption and in avoiding that, giving people direct access to their content, right? More logistical efficiencies, the end goal of delivering high quality work. And again, as I said earlier on, maybe breaking the status quo to say that there are ways that we can innovate with the current technology we have, with new technology, but again, in the mindset of how is it being leveraged. I put this together. I had a slide here where I was putting together formulas and so forth, and what I decided to go and do is just kind of throw out a lot of the comments that we hear as we talk about efficiency. And I often say, efficiency can be as dangerous as using the word cloud without knowing the firm culture. But we often hear that as you talk about efficiency, we have the billable hour, so we're not interested in that, or that's what our support staff is for because that isn't the best use of our lawyers' time, but that's why we pay for folks in Wheeling, Virginia to do this type of work. Or, the other side of things where are these realization rates matching what your billable hour is and your billing rates? Are you able to ensure that there aren't heavy write-offs? We all know about the alternate fee arrangements that clients are pushing on, the fixed fees, where we don't want to pay for some of the work that isn't institutional, that isn't the IP of what the law firm and the particular high-end partner can provide. We know firms are going lean, not only in support staff and real estate, but also in technology, right? We don't want our office applications to be bombarded with multiple add-ins. We don't want anything that would potentially crash the desktop. Those are catastrophic. Self-sufficiency, more than ever being important, not only because firms are going lean, but because we have a workforce and a generation of individuals that expect technology and feel that they can accomplish these tasks just based on their interaction with their mobile devices and things that have kind of set a baseline for expectations of technology. We have partners who have been in the firm for decades, and while it is not logistically efficient for them to dig through the DMS to find a prior work product or a prior matter they've worked on, there's this sense of pride that I can remember what we did 18 or 24 months ago, and I can go find that and find that language. Often we think of it as a rite of passage, right? I had to do this when I was coming into the firm. I was a first year, a junior associate. So we don't want technology to help with some of that. They should learn in that sense. I had an individual tell me that we now look at how profitable we are based on the partner per hour ratio, meaning on a particular matter, how often does a partner need to get involved, and out of those hours that they're involved, how much profit is associated with what they bill versus what we're bringing in. And then, oops, and I don't know why that jumped through again. Let me get back to this one last time. The last one I think is something we hear maybe more on the litigation side of the house, but definitely that we don't have repeatable work. And I'll be the first to tell you that that's a fallacy. You may not have repeatable work in the particular matter and some of the legal content that's going in that's specific to that situation, but there is absolutely repeatable work on a daily basis that requires producing the work product through Microsoft Word. So the last piece I want to touch before we'll jump into something is around what I had said is that the ABA made some changes that now include AI. I think for the majority of the folks on the phone, if you've been asked what are we doing about AI, that's an unfair question to you. It's an umbrella term. There's a variety of different technologies that touch on AI. Ultimately, finding out what the individual wants to do will help with those types of conversations, but it is now important that AI does fall under that from a competency standpoint, and that we should be using technology and we should be looking at using AI when appropriate so that we're better serving our clients. So I think I don't want to harp in on this, but I think it is important to understand that AI is now included. Even though it doesn't include every single state, that doesn't mean that it's not best for representing our client base with the knowledge of what other expectations are across the globe. I want to quickly jump into a product, and the product is going to be called Clause Companion, and I want to showcase some things that maybe are not necessarily widely available when you see a demonstration or when you think about this, and I want to show it in the sense of the Litera desktop. So this is going to really be a content bank that's accessible in Word via our end-to-end drafting platform. This is all about eliminating the logistical inefficiencies, avoiding disruption, helping curate data from a larger repository, eliminating the need for copy and paste in a lot of circumstances, which we know to give us some challenges, prevent some of the stability and formatting issues that occur, can be shared across groups and individuals. And really the last piece here, which is we're all, no one's opposed to reusing of content, we're often opposed to reusing of documents. And we'll showcase how we can actually address that. So if I jump into Word really quickly here, I want to just show how I have a document, I have my bank open on the right-hand side. We can get into how all the content gets in here. I had mentioned you'll see some advancements that we'll be announcing here in the next month or so about the ability for us to connect into other platforms and really help streamline and consume data on a larger scale. We've actually on our website introduced something that we're marketing as Litera Connect, so I encourage you to go and take a look at that. But I want to point out how here's a perfect scenario where I want to add content. My content's right here. I don't need to leave Word. I don't need to leave my document. I don't need to copy and paste. I can, in fact, use track changes, which I'll turn on, and I can find a clause or a portion of language that is appropriate. And with a simple double click, I can bring it into the document and I can have those changes tracked, right? So this is native to the way Microsoft Word works. It is complementing the way that most people work as they draft work product. And I don't have to worry about organizing some of the low value work, as we said, and automating the numbering in this particular case. What I'm able to do is bring in the language. It doesn't disrupt the way that I like to work with track changes. And now I can go through and continue to construct this document in a sense of drag and drop or double clicking, again, avoiding copy and paste and leaving the screen that I'm currently focused on. When I had introduced Clause Companion a little bit, I said I'm going to show it in the sense that you wouldn't necessarily think a product called Clause Companion could work. So we know that somewhere upwards of 70%, sometimes even closer to 80% of work product starts from prior work. I'm going to showcase how rather than going and visiting somewhere in the DMS to find that matter, I can actually have full documents that are made available to me. I could look at the different versions. I could scroll down through them and see any of the information that I need. But when I double click and bring this into the document, I want to show something. I want to show not only would it be able to inherit the formatting, the document styles if it wasn't brought into a blank document, but when it is brought into a blank document, it can really bring across important elements. So you'll see it came in completely styled. And I even want to show that down here in a scenario where I've used a cross-reference, it's able to honor that cross-reference. And as I click and navigate to that, I can go and see those. So it keeps all of the underlying components to a document there. So this is one of the ways that you can help address the fact that people prefer to reuse content because it's easier. Focus on the reuse of content as opposed to the document, and not necessarily have some of the adoption troubles that you may have on a template solution, let's say. Again, the other piece I wanted to point out was I've addressed this through the larger offering that we call Litera Desktop, which is the end-to-end solution that's based out on tasks. There's really no product branding here. It's intuitive to the individual who is accomplishing these tasks. And again, really hitting home that this is understanding how someone would work in the day-to-day, in the life of theme, rather than looking at our technology in a linear fashion. What I can see is I could chronologically move left to right to accomplish all the tasks that are required. It's logistically efficient, and it works in any sort of scenario, any sort of billing arrangement, because it's all focused on automating the low-value work and really the unrewarding aspects of things that are those necessary evils. So I'll jump back to the PowerPoint. I think we did see a couple of questions come back in, but at this point in time, what we really want to do is just answer any questions or outstanding concerns that come to mind.
Awesome. No, great presentation, man. I particularly like you comparing the efficiency piece to UPS. I'm going to have to tell my boss I'm only taking right turns. I'm sure he'll love it. All right, so this first question, this is going to come from Alex, asking, our firm struggles with getting lawyers to use our template solution. Any recommendations on how to get lawyers to buy into not reusing documents?
So I think that works just off of what I've shown right there, right? The reason, I think it's important to understand why are people choosing to reuse old documents, and the feeling is that it is a lot easier to spend 10 or 15 minutes to find it in the DMS and open it and unwind all of the content in there than it is to use certain template solutions, right? So understanding that it's ease of use is the reason people are choosing to go that route. I just showed how we can actually have a full document that's made available there. We could even redact all of the PII, all of the sensitive information, specific client information, and allow someone to just simply double click that and not have to go through the act of unwinding what is previously in that document. The other piece that someone benefits from is that it doesn't have that metadata coming forward, right? Who is the original author? When was the original create date? How much time was spent editing this? So through the combination of some of our technologies that I know, we can identify the proper nouns, we can help you start to redact those, and then you can save off a pristine copy into your clause bank, which allows you to just simply double click, generate the content, and use the appropriate templates going forward without having to maybe interact with that template solution.
That's awesome. And actually, I'll just, we'll call it there. There were a few questions that we didn't get the answers to, but we can follow up with those directly. So just with the last minute, I want to make sure that we, obviously, thank you, Matt, for a great presentation, and thanks to all of you guys for joining. If you liked the presentation that was done today, I mentioned this is a monthly series, but you can see a full list of all of our webinars at litera.com/webinars. Our next one is going to air on March 28th, and that's going to focus, really put a spotlight on how we improve productivity with document assembly solutions, specifically profiling one of our solutions, Forte. So take a look at that and any other sessions we have available. But once again, thank you to Matt for sharing your insights, and then thank you all for joining. Have a good rest of the day.